talk about statewide elections and who we're going to vote for. Oh, I'm sorry.
The 2014 elections in one word? Boring. It's going to be like going and watching the Harlem Globetrotters and the Washington Generals and believing that the outcome is in doubt. It's not in doubt. We know what's going to happen. The Democrats are going to sweep most of the partisan offices in the state elections. We know that. The question is which Democrats are going to win. Now, there are some Republican candidates who may tickle your fancy or be interesting. As a matter of fact, I'm going to talk about one or two of them later on in the show. But by and large, this is going to be a battle of Democrats because the Republican Party doesn't know who it is or what it wants to be when it grows up. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, there's a civil war going on right here in the good old state of California. And most of us don't know about it because most of us aren't Republicans. The registration for the Republican Party is somewhere south of 30%, heading towards 25%. And until they get that mess straightened out, I don't expect to see any really great candidates for any elective offices anytime soon. So we're going to sit here and we're going to figure out and talk a little bit more about who you should vote for.
The 2014 primary elections are upon us, and it's time to show up to the polls again. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of interesting candidates or issues to show up for. We're not voting for president, so we don't get a chance to vote on Hillary Clinton or President Barack Obama and their handling of Benghazi or any of the other myriad of issues that we love how they performed. And in terms of the statewide elections, we've got a gubernatorial race between liberal Democrat Jerry Brown, who's not my favorite candidate in the world, but let's be honest, things were bad when he started and they're a little bit better now. And he's running against two Republican candidates who, in my opinion, just don't measure up. So what about the rest of the races? Is there anyone else that's really interesting to vote for? Not really. It, quite frankly, is a bunch of who's that and where did this person get their experience? But it's still important that we show up. Why? Why is it important? Because let's be honest, the big races aren't the only things that are on the ballot. We have local elections, school boards, city councils, county board of supervisors. You know, these are the folks that actually make more decisions that impact our everyday lives. So it's important that we show up to the polls, but not just show up, but that we know what the candidates stand for and make sure that their values are in line with ours, that what they say they want to do is in line with what we believe is important to be done. We speak through our votes. Our engagement in the political process, in the civil governing process, is through our vote. It's important that we show up. It's important that we're involved and we're engaged. But it's also important to make sure that we vote our values. I have a question for David from Kelly. Now, Kelly asks if money plays a role in increasing or decreasing the differences in the two parties.
Well, I'd say it depends on the inherent strategy of the folks that are giving the money. Some organizations and individuals give money because they want to influence policy decisions. They want to influence the legislative process. There are other folks that give because they want to promote a particular set of interests. So in some ways, it creates a tension there because you have some people who are pursuing one strategy, which is to draw the parties apart because, for instance, you may have people that want to support abortion rights or civil rights or pro-gun policies. That serves to actually pull people apart because those are real hot button issues. There are other folks that are pursuing a leadership or a policy implementation strategy, which they seek to actually get the leadership of the parties together, and so that actually tends to create some level of cohesion among the groups.
So in other words, let's take, for example, what the business community does, because what a lot of people don't realize is everybody thinks, oh, business interests give to Republicans. No, business interests give to whoever's in power. In the state of California, more money goes to elect Democrats than goes to elect Republicans. And that's in large part because they're hoping to get Democrats who support business interests.
Right.
Right or wrong?
No, you're right.
Okay.
You're right.
Do you believe that they've been effective?
I believe they've been effective at getting elected policyholders that will at least listen to them, or policymakers, excuse me, not policyholders. Those, shout out to the insurance company. But it's those people who hold positions of power in the legislative process. What they're buying is access. They're not necessarily buying outcomes, but they are buying access. And to the extent, because remember, Craig, you know this, is that policy making is about what happens and also what doesn't happen. Blocking certain proposals, keeping certain things from coming to a vote. That's what that influence does. So you see donors giving money so that they can actually influence the process.
Right. Well, but what's interesting with the business community is that it seems like no matter how much money they give, it seems like their core issues never really get addressed or never really fully represented by the quote-unquote Democratic leadership. In other words, what I firmly believe is, yeah, that money will buy you a seat at the table, but it doesn't guarantee you a meal.
Well, that may be your perspective, but I think on taken another way, you can look at it and say that there are policies and proposals that are put forth that don't necessarily get enacted. See, the problem with the Republicans and with business folks is they want their policies promoted their way. But you gotta understand that if you're hiring me to cook, I'm gonna put my flavoring and seasoning on what you're asking for, and you're either gonna like the meal or you're not gonna like the meal.
Well, all I know is that if you don't like the meal, you don't go back to the restaurant and pay another bill. That's just stupid.
Our next question is also from Kelly. So, Craig, Kelly wants to know two things. One, should national or individual interests trump when you're making your voting decision? And should economic or moral views play a greater role in how you cast your vote?
All right. Well, first of all, Kelly, thank you for submitting some questions. The rest of y'all slip in. I don't even know what to say to y'all. Anyway, okay. So first of all, individual versus national needs. I think that it's important to understand that as individuals, we are part of a collective, and understanding that making sure that we're working to meet our individual needs, as long as our individual needs are not selfish. There's nothing wrong with being self-interested, but as long as they're not quote unquote selfish, like I'm voting for this person because they're going to give me money, that's selfish. But I believe that voting for someone who institutes policies that allow you and allow your community, that better not just you, but your community, I think that's the way that we ought to look at it. Not so much, honestly, when it comes to national interest versus local interest, I'm a big believer in local is best. I believe that the closer decisions are made to constituents or to voters, the better it is. Number one, because we're able to hold them more accountable. Number two, those decisions are more likely to reflect the values and the interests of the individuals that are being voted on. So that's probably where I would put. I would probably say that, make sure that what you're looking at, it's nothing wrong if it benefits you, but also make sure it's something that benefits the whole, as well as, most importantly, protects the rights of all Americans or Californians or Sacramentans, whatever the issue is.
So when I look at a ballot issue and I'm looking at it, you're saying that I should look at it through a personal prism first, and then how it impacts the larger collective?
Yes.
Okay. That's fair enough.
I mean, you don't ignore how it affects the collective, but I believe first and foremost, we are a country that's based on individual rights and individual responsibilities. I think that anything that takes away from those things, anything that supersedes individual rights or comes against individual rights or seeks to take responsibility away from the individual, I'll use probably one of my best examples has to do with the individual responsibility to educate our children. We treat public schools like, like, well, it's the school district's responsibility to make sure our children are educated. No, it's my responsibility as a parent. It's our responsibility. Now, we delegate that responsibility to our schools, and we have and then after that, we have a responsibility to hold them accountable, right? So I think it's important that individual rights and individual responsibilities are
But I think,
protected
Craig,
for the individual.
I think, Craig, and I know we don't want to get into an education argument
Right.
today, but I would say, to use that as an example, I think there's a need, particularly with a large and complex country like we have, individual responsibility for taking care of educating your children creates some wildly inconsistent outcomes for students. That's why we have a public school system where the concept is to make sure that everyone has a high standard. So of education. So for me, my thing is it's not about parents abdicating their responsibility. It is about entrusting it's about entrusting the school system to play a role, a central role in educating kids. But that doesn't absolve the parent.
Right.
That doesn't absolve the parent from making sure
there's
that they're
nothing
the first.
there's nothing there that you said that I disagree with. It's still, though, first and foremost is incumbent on the individual responsibility. Meaning, I have a responsibility to make sure my children are educated.
Right.
If I choose to delegate to send them to a public school, and that public school isn't doing their job, I have a responsibility to make sure that school is doing their job. I have a responsibility to be down there talking with teachers, talking with principals.
We agree.
I have a responsibility to make sure I'm electing school board members who know what they're doing. Yada yada yada.
Okay.
So
We're good.
We don't
See,
disagree.
Kelly, we have the answers.
Okay. The other question that you asked regarding economics or morality. First of all, I think that whatever you use, whatever your set of values that are most important to you, I think it's important for the individual to have a right to decide. That's the thing. You have a right to choose what's most important to you.
Right.
I don't believe that either should dominate. I believe that all of them have a percentage factor, shall we say. All of them play a role. And for some, that's more important than others. I have no problem. All right. Let's start at the top of the ticket, because I think that's the one that everyone's interested in. You've got Jerry Brown, you've got Neil Kashkari, and you've got Tim Donnelly. What are your thoughts?
2 words. Jerry Brown.
Yeah.
Jerry Brown. Look, Tim Donnelly, you're great entertainment. You're interesting. You're funny. You're quotable. But you will never, and I repeat this, never, ever, ever be governor of the state of California. It's just not going to work. It's not going to happen.
Let me just throw something there. First of all, keep in mind that no one said that Tim Donnelly would get elected to the state legislature. When you look at the makeup of his district, which is a pretty moderate district, and he got elected. And then he turned around in a redrawn district that was drawn to specifically get him out. He got reelected. Now, having said all that, here's my issues. Tim Donnelly and I agree on a lot of issues. We agree on firearms issues. We agree on the issue of protecting innocent life. We agree on the issue of marriage, taxation. There's a lot of stuff we agree on. I just think when I think of someone who I want representing me, and I want representing our values in the state capitol, I would rather not choose to vote for someone who is going to, for lack of a better term, plant their flag on defending the Confederate flag. I'm sorry, but
gotcha.
But let's just be honest. It's, I'm just thinking, okay, you're going to decide to vote against a bill, be the only vote against a bill that says we're just not going to sell the Confederate flag on state property. It wasn't banning the Confederate flag. It wasn't saying that you can't have it or fly it on private property. It wasn't in it. All it was saying is it's not a state government. It's not even a national government. It's not a formal country. Why would we, as the state of California, sell that flag? Someone who's going to choose to associate his opponent with Sharia law. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, it's difficult for me to take that candidate seriously.
Tim Donnelly reminds me of a skinny Peter Griffin on Family Guy. He's funny.
You know what?
Craig, he's very interesting though. I mean, I love hearing all of the interesting adventures he goes on, like saying he has 2 great women and then basically getting dumped by one of those great women who was his campaign manager. And then he tried to come out and say, well, it was a mutual parting of the ways. And she's like, no, it wasn't.
Well, what I will say is that...
And then he got busted with loaded... You're a state legislator... Okay, get this, guys. You're a state legislator, and you're flying back from your district to Sacramento, and you've taken this flight. He's being reelected once or twice? Once or twice?
Once.
Okay, he's been reelected. So he's been on a whole bunch of planes, right? Because he has to fly back and forth between the district. Anybody that goes into an airport knows that you're not supposed to carry a loaded firearm. Guess what he does? He's a state legislator, and he carries a loaded firearm onto an airplane.
Okay, well, number one, he didn't carry a loaded firearm onto an airplane. It was in his bag. It was in his bag.
It was in his bag. Yeah. He didn't declare it.
Well, because he didn't know it was in there. He didn't know it was in there.
Was it his bag?
David.
Was it his bag?
Let's put it this way.
I know what's in my luggage. When I fly, I know what's in my luggage.
Do you know what's in your luggage right now?
Yes, I do.
Do you fly as often as Tim Donnelly did? Do you fly minimum twice a week, back and forth?
No.
Putting stuff in and out of your backpack.
But I know what's in...
Look, all I'm saying... Okay, let us clarify.
So his wife put the gun in the bag?
It was a mistake. He made a mistake. I'll give it to him. He made a mistake. It's a mistake that someone who claims to be a gun advocate probably shouldn't have made.
There you go.
It's a mistake that a person running for the governor of California definitely shouldn't have made. But then again, it wasn't like he was like, I don't know, selling rocket launchers or anything like that, like our good friend Leland Yee. Is he still going to be on the ballot for Secretary of State?
Leland Yee is, by the way...
Yeah, the Democratic front-runner. Yeah,
don't vote for Leland
Rocket launchers for votes. Rocket launchers for votes. Anyway.
Don't vote for Leland Yee.
But my point is that Tim Donnelly has not been a particularly effective legislator, and I believe he would be even less effective as a governor. So... that's my issue with him. And my issue with Mr. Kashkari is quite simply this. You haven't been anywhere. You haven't been involved in politics except for TARP, which most of us on the right and the left agree was a huge mistake. You haven't chosen to vote much. And when you did, you voted for Barack Obama, and now you claim that it was a mistake. Well, duh, you shouldn't have done that in the first place. And then on top of it, you want to come and you want to run as the Republican nominee, but you're bad on guns, you're bad on traditional marriage, you're bad on abortion, you're bad on horrible on education. The reality is that you're not particularly good candidate. You're not particularly Republican.
Yes, that was going to be my point. Right. But he has one thing going for him that makes him a true Republican. And that is that he's trying to come in and buy his seat in the election, which the last 3 or 4 candidates for governor have tried to do the same thing.
I'm convinced it's a strategy that he's now, once he loses, because he's going to lose, he's going to run for lower office and use all the name ID that he got from running for governor. I think that's his strategy. Right. It's got to be a strategy because in the end, I'm sorry, but it's just very difficult for me to take you seriously. Run as a Democrat, run as an independent, but don't tell me you're a Republican. And come on, man, I want to at least be able to convict you of being a Republican. And guess what?
Can't do it. Can't do it.
Okay. Another race that's interesting to me, and it's probably more about who I'm against than who I'm for, and that has to be Attorney General. Attorney General Kamala Harris. And my issues with Ms. Harris are multiple. First and foremost, it starts with her unwillingness to do her job. Now, there were many times as Attorney General when Dan Lundgren was forced to represent positions on firearms that he didn't agree with because he was the Attorney General. That was his job, and those were California laws. Unfortunately, the issue that I have with her is that what she has done is under Proposition 8, which was the protect marriage, the definition of marriage. She refused to defend the California Constitution in court, something that she swore to do. So, needless to say, we disagree on Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, you're good to go on my book.
The only other race that I was really interested in talking about was superintendent of public instruction.
Okay.
And I'll just say this, and this is no secret because I've said this for a long time. I believe Republican Party has largely been right on the issue of education and education reform. Having said that, I think on the priority of things that we've put out there, that we've stood on, I think it's been a low priority. It's kind of sad because when I look at education reform, and I'm starting to see that the leaders in education reform aren't Republicans. You're starting to see Democrats, in particular, Democrats who are not supported by the teachers union, standing up and supporting and being the voice for things like teacher accountability, which means addressing the issue of evaluating teachers and including student performance, as well as reforming the teacher dismissal and tenure process. Basically holding teachers accountable, but also providing more local control of schools. The people who've been pushing that, unfortunately, Republicans have somewhat talked about it, but it's been Democrats who've been the ones who've been pushing it. You look at our candidates for superintendent of public instruction, we've got 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. First of all, I cannot remember the last time Republicans had a legitimate candidate running for superintendent of public instruction.
Right.
Lydia Gutierrez is not a legitimate candidate. She's a nice enough lady, but quite frankly, is not a legitimate candidate. So when I look at the 2 candidates who are there, I have Tom Torlakson, who is bought and paid for by the California Teachers Union, California Teachers Association, and the NEA, and who is a representative of the same old in Sacramento. All you have to do is go and look at his candidate's picture with the mustache, and you know that he's a creature. He's a candidate of the past. But having said that, then I look at this guy Marshall Tuck, and I look at what he talks about in terms of accountability. I look at his record in terms of accountability and what he's done in LA Unified and other areas, trying to work with charter schools to bring some level of accountability and some reform to public education. And I got to say, he's one Democrat that impresses me. Normally, I won't say that I've never voted for a Democrat. I don't know that I've ever statewide publicly said, hey, I'm voting for this Democrat, but hey, I'm going to be voting for this Democrat. And I think it sends an important message because I think all of us want some reform in education. I don't think any of us want to see the public education system go away, but I think that we want to see some accountability in it. I think we want to see a system that works. And unfortunately, in my never to be humble opinion, the number one group of folks who've stood in the way of reform, of education reform in the state of California, are the California Teachers Association. And it's a little difficult to continue to support candidates who are supported by them if you believe that education is important. Now, I know that you can't say anything on this issue. My brother here works for the California School Boards Association, so he can't say anything on this issue. But just in terms of electoral politics in general, when it comes to education, just give me your thoughts.
Well, I think this is a unique time and a unique opportunity for change because, like you said, you have a decoupling of a traditional alliance, which is civil rights organizations and the powerful California Teachers Association. And you've seen a decoupling of that in a number of instances, but more recently you've got civil rights organizations really stepping out and supporting the local control funding formula, the implementation of that, and really pushing for school site control of resources and decision making, really trying to make the notion of subsidiarity, which means devolving decision making down to the lowest level possible. They're really pushing that, and they're really pushing, like you said, accountability. They're really pushing full funding. I mean, they're doing a lot of things that are making the more traditional powers in education really nervous because they're really charting another course and saying, we're not going to be hiding behind the powerful CTA. We're stepping out on our own, and they're actually finding, because you've got folks that are willing to fund it, you've got big pocket donors, private philanthropies and private foundations that are really pushing and promoting that kind of reform. The question then becomes, what happens when the foundations and the individual, multi-billionaire donors, when they get bored with it, education?
Well, folks, that's about it. If you want to hit us up on Facebook, talk a little bit more about election or electoral politics or who we're supporting for what race you want to throw out, maybe talk to us about some of those congressional or local races. We would love to talk with you. Make sure to go online and vote. Let us know, who won this particular debate. I don't know that it was much of a debate, but I think both of us agree that this election is not the most exciting.
No, not the most exciting.
Yeah.
No.
But having said that, we are going to be at the polls. We will be voting. We will be exercising not just our right to vote, but our responsibility to vote. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.